This is John, your host with Dairyland Frights podcast, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. And tonight, I have a very special guest with me, Jeff Finup. Is that how you pronounce your name?
That's
Jeff?
right. Yep, you got it.
From the Wisconsin Legends podcast. So, welcome, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, John. Excited to be on board.
Excellent. So, Jeff, tell me a little bit about yourself and your podcast and, some of the things you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like John said, Jeff Finup, I grew up in central Wisconsin, in Wisconsin Rapids, of all places, and, the river cities. And it was really, a peaceful community. It was great, but there was always something spooky around the corner. So I grew up with stories from my grandpa and my mom about, kind of the old times in Wisconsin, a haunted house near where my grandpa grew up, and a haunted house actually kitty cornered to me in my backyard. And my mom didn't shy away from this stuff. And I got intrigued at a young age. I would listen to my parents talk about ghosts at dinner parties and swap stories. And I would be the kid at the Catholic school library checking out the supernatural or cryptid or UFO books, whatever was in stock, and then it came to the era where the Goosebumps books started coming out. So I tried to collect all of those. And then we'd go home and we'd watch Nickelodeon and Are You Afraid of the Dark? So I was captivated at a young age. And it wasn't until, I became an adult. I moved to Phoenix for a couple of years, and then I came back to Wisconsin. And I started, picking up books by like Chad Lewis and an old book called Wisconsin Lore, and really diving into some of the legends and lore of where I grew up. And I always knew there was something spooky about Wisconsin. I grew up in the 80s and the early 90s, and you'd hear, the news broke about Jeffrey Dahmer. And we heard tales of Ed Gein. Living in Wisconsin Rapids, I was in Kellner, which is on the far east side of Wisconsin Rapids. It's not too far from Plainfield. And my friend's mom was from Plainfield, and her grandma grew up. And she claims that she was actually babysat by old Eddie himself.
Oh, wow.
So that was a family legend that he passed along to me at a young age. And, that kind of sent a tingle up my spine thinking about somebody with firsthand knowledge of Ed Gein. So kind of had a spooky childhood, very fun and lighthearted, and just kind of got interested in it. And that kind of led to my latest project with Mike from American Ghost Walks and the Wisconsin Legends podcast. But a couple years before we started that, I started an Instagram account called BadgerLand Legends. So the theme of BadgerLand Legends is the people, places, and things that make Wisconsin legendary. So it could be anything from, just a random haunted house, the Beast of Bray Road, the Hodag. It could be fun. It could be scary. It could be murderous like Gein or Dahmer, or it could just be some fun history from Wisconsin.
Right. And the funny thing, Jeff, is, and Mike and I were talking about that. You can check out our episode where I talked to Mike Huberty. He was a great guest. So there's so many things here in the Midwest. And, when you think of spookiness, right, you think of maybe New York, LA, Chicago, and they're all great cities, and they all have their
New
own
England,
New England, correct? Stephen King, right? That's the first thing that comes to your mind. And people don't think about the Midwest per se, but there are so many great tales and so many spooky tales here that people, they just don't think about it, right? I did an episode, about this place called Hummel Park, which is in Omaha, Nebraska. And more than 15 people have been murdered in this park.
Oh, man.
I didn't even know about it. And their ghosts and their spirits are everywhere. And people during the day they will play at this park, right? Like just like Mendota Park here in Madison, Wisconsin, or your regular park anywhere, right?
Hmm.
But at night, nobody goes there because they even say there are albino cannibals who live in the park.
Oh
And I was
my!
just like, what? Omaha, Nebraska. I've been to Omaha, Nebraska, and it's like, well, it's Nebraska. It's fine. There's
I've
nothing
been
wrong
through.
with it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You just don't think albino cannibals in the woods of a park.
yeah. Public
Okay.
park.
Yeah.
Yeah, place you take your family for a picnic, and there's apparently albino cannibals. Kind of
Right,
reminds me
right.
of like kind of the Haunchyville story of the
Yes.
roving band of little people that live in the outskirts of Milwaukee and Muskego,
Yeah.
and were kind of vengeful towards their former circus master, and ended up murdering him, and then kind of were protective of a young albino boy that wandered into their camp. And if you
Yeah.
want to check out the whole story on that, you can check out the Wisconsin Legends podcast episode on Haunchyville.
Yes. And please do. I highly recommend it. It is a wonderful, spooky story.
Yeah,
So
and
before we get started, one of the things I wanted to mention, you mentioned Ed Gein. I have a
yeah,
quick story to tell you.
sure,
So my mom's friend back in the late 70s, early 80s was the head nurse of Mendota Mental Health Institution.
it's right down the
And
street from where I'm right now. Yeah,
awesome. So my mom's friend was in charge of good old Ed. And this is one of my favorite stories she told me. So Ed, when you walked to his room, at this time he was like in his 70s or something. He was, well, harmless, as you could call harmless. And you would
yeah,
walk into his room, and if he liked you, he would smile at you, really creepy smile. If he didn't like you, he would give you this cold, like predator stare. And he would do
mm-hmm.
that to my mom's friend. And my mom's friend wouldn't take any crap. She's the head nurse of a huge institution, right? And so she'd be, Ed, you look at me like that again, you know what's going to happen. And Ed would just kind of back off, and he'd be like, okay. But one day, a new nurse came in, and my mom's friend was gone, doing some other business. Doesn't matter. So she went into the room, and the other nurses wouldn't dare go into this room. They would, they'd be the last ones to go in. So she went into the room. She didn't know anything. She didn't know who he was. Nothing, right? Which is very strange that she wouldn't know. So anyway, my mom's friend comes back, and the nurses are like, "Oh, we're worried about Sarah." Right? And she's like, well, why are you worried about Sarah? What's going on? She goes, she's been in Ed's room for like 30 minutes. And my mom's friend goes, why didn't you go in there and get her and check up on her? Like, oh, no way. So this nurse, Sarah, whatever her name was, comes out and she has this big smile on her face. And she's like, oh, that guy is so nice. Ed is so nice. And everybody looks at her and they go, do you know who that is? And she's like, he reminds me of my grandpa. And they're like, okay. And they're like, that's Ed Gein, the butcher of Plainfield. And they explained everything to her. And she turned pale white, according to our friend, my mom's friend, nearly fainted and quit that day
Oh
immediately.
my,
Never came back. And
unreal! That's a great story.
that's crazy, and I just like, she was in this room with this guy just thinking it's like your grandpa, like you're telling a fishing story. Hey, I caught this great fish, I went fishing today, it was great. Yeah. And and I always ask my mom's friend, she has other stories, and she goes, oh sweetie, I'm not going to tell you those stories, they're a little too raw, because I was like 16 at the time or something.
Yeah,
But
that'd be
could
great
you imagine
to hear
that?
them now if you could. But I imagine
Oh,
she's
I'd give anything
yeah,
to hear. But
yeah,
could you imagine that if you didn't know who he was and you saw a picture of Ed Gein? I mean, it
yeah.
kind of looks like your grandpa, right? Well, it looks kind of strange, but I don't know. maybe.
Yeah, he has kind of a like you said, kind of a menacing smile. But from what I've
Oh,
heard about Ed Gein is that he was a generally pleasant
yes.
individual, but he had a hot temper
Mm,
and a morbid fascination.
yes.
And that's what got him in trouble. Because
Yes.
he's not a serial killer per se. He's
No.
only had two deaths that have been
Correct.
confirmed.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
and both were matronly women that kind of reminded him of his mom. And
Yes.
after his mom died, he kind of snapped, and that's when the murders and the grave robbing
Yeah.
really came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to his gravestone, I still think I'm not really sure if this is true or not, but people were going to his gravestone and chipping off part of his gravestone and selling it on eBay. So the police or whoever took his gravestone, and I guess now it's in the basement of the city hall in Plainfield. And people say they will not go in the basement. They said when they
Yeah,
go down
so
there, feel weird. So go on.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've
go on.
I've heard that story too. So yeah, what you heard was right, that people would go to his gravestone and they would chip off a piece as a souvenir. Um, and then I know that the actual gravestone was stolen in 1999 or 2000, and
Right.
it ended up in Seattle by like an Ed Gein collector.
Oh,
And
wow.
he started advertising that he had it. Well, it was stolen property, so they ended up getting
Yeah.
back, and apparently it's in the Washara County courthouse basement. But I haven't been able to confirm that. Somebody told me it was actually in a chiropractor's office in their basement, but
What?
I haven't been able to track down the
Yeah.
actual whereabouts of the headstone. But if you go to the Plainfield Cemetery,
Hmm.
you will see Augusta's gravestone. You'll see his
Hmm.
father's gravestone. You'll see his brother's gravestone. But it's like a missing tooth, and that's Ed's gravestone. But
Okay.
it continues. If you look, there's a big divot because people will come to Eddie's gravesite because he's still buried there. There's
Eddie.
no
Hello.
gravestone, but they will dig up a piece of dirt and then they'll put it in like a little jar, or maybe like a little test tube or like a little
Why?
amulet to wear around their neck as
That's
kind of a
that's crazy.
memento of Ed Gein. So
Hmm.
just morbid fascination continues
Yeah.
on in the Gein story.
It really does. Um. Now I have to ask this, Jeff. Can you tell me about a personal story, like paranormal story, or something that you were involved in that kind of, I wouldn't say scared you, but maybe it was really interesting, and you kind of thought about it to this day.
Yeah, so for somebody like me that goes out and I look to kind of have an encounter with these things, I don't have too many encounters myself. And I've kind of commiserated
Like me.
with Chad Lewis about this. And he goes to different haunted locations. He does dares, and he rarely has an account. But I've had a couple.
Okay.
Um, and last night actually, we live in a newer house, and
Mm,
we've never had. It seems like wherever my wife has lived, she's had some kind of spooky encounter or
yeah.
something she's picked up. She's like kind of sensitive like that, and I go
Okay.
out and look for this stuff, and I have nothing. But anyway, I have a 6-year-old daughter and a
Mm,
3-year-old son,
oh
and
boy.
we take turns putting them to bed each night. So
Sure.
I was putting my daughter to bed last night,
Mm,
and I was in her room. I was getting her in bed. I was starting her the meditations that she listens to fall asleep. And as I did that, my wife came out. She came into my daughter's bedroom, gave her a hug, gave her a kiss, and then she
hmm.
walked into our bedroom right across the
Yeah.
hall. And I sat in my daughter's room for a couple minutes, just making sure that she was ready to go to sleep. And then I gave her a hug and a kiss. And then I walked back into my bedroom, and the bathroom light was on, and my wife often leaves the bathroom light on. And I had thought she was in the bathroom.
Sure.
So I sat down on the bed, just waiting for it to come out. And then a couple minutes had passed, and I looked over to where we keep the baby monitors,
Yeah.
and they were gone. So I'm like, oh, she must
Okay.
have left. I thought she
Yeah.
was in there.
Sure.
So I came downstairs thinking nothing of it.
Mm.
And I came down to the main level, and my wife says, did you go into Isla's room and then go back in? And I'm like, what do you mean? I said, well, when I left after I hugged Isla and went into the room, I got changed in the bathroom
Mm.
and I heard someone come in and some shuffling. And then
Wow.
when I came out, there was nobody
Yeah.
there. And then
Sure.
I walked past Isla's room, and you were still in there, and you were just getting ready to like tell her goodnight.
Mhm.
So then I went back downstairs.
Sure.
So I assumed that you had stopped in there and then stopped back, maybe to take
Yeah.
care of like a need of hers. And I said,
All right.
no, I was in there the whole time. And then I came in expecting you to be there, and you weren't there. So she says, well, I heard something. I feel like I saw something. I definitely felt present. So that was actually something that happened last night that kind of is a
Right.
head scratcher for me. So
Yeah.
we'll see what becomes of that, or if this was just kind of one off. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think that we haunt ourselves. So they talk about residual hauntings
Mhm.
and active hauntings,
Right.
and maybe some of these residual hauntings are just impressions or imprints or shadows of us
Right.
going through our lives. So this is a routine we do every night, and maybe that energy it holds on. So it's hard
Yeah.
to say what actually happened there, but it was interesting, and it was kind of on top of my mind because we were just digesting it again, this
Sure.
afternoon.
Yeah, sure. So that reminds me of a really sweet story I read one time about this family, and their grandma lived with him for a number of years, and their grandma couldn't really sleep at night, so she would wake up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and she would go and check up on the children. So she would open the doors and look in, and then go back to sleep and stuff, make sure they're okay, cover them up, whatever. So grandma passes away, and everybody's
Mm-hmm.
sad and everything like that, obviously. And one day, or one night, they're sleeping and they hear footsteps down the hall, and they hear the children's door open and then close. And they're like, oh, you have little kids, so they'll get up sometimes in the middle of the night to be like, oh, I want to watch SpongeBob or something. You're like, no, get to bed. Right? I want a cookie. You're like, no, sweetie, get to bed. And so the guy was like, okay, all right. And then this continued to happen. So then he said, you know what I'm going to do? He thought it'd be fun to catch his kids. So he got out his video camera and he put it out in the hallway so he could catch his kids and have a little fun with them, right? So he goes to bed that night. Same thing happens. So the next morning he wakes up, he presses, he goes, looks at the tape of the video camera, and he sees this like spirit, an outline that looked like his grandmother going in to his children's bedroom. And of course, he was like shocked. And he was like, what is this? And then some paranormal researchers say, well, that's a residual haunting. Your grandmother lived there for years. She still's there. She still loves you and your children, and she's checking up on them. Nothing to worry about. Just leave it alone. But it was just like a sweet little story, right? And
Yeah.
you wonder if that does happen, like you're saying, just because you go into the same routines over and over again, the things like to happen all over with people where it's just something nice, but it can be also
Mm-hmm.
something terrible. And that residual haunting just keeps on happening. I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. It's something I've always been intrigued with. Like, they say in physics that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transmuted
Mm,
or transferred. So
right.
that energy, our um, bodily energy, where does it go when we die? We don't
Right.
know, and I think that's kind of what people in our field kind of tried to figure out, or at least have an encounter with.
Yeah. So I have to ask you a quick question.
Sure.
So there's a residual haunting, which we just talked about, and
Mm-hmm.
an intelligent haunting where it's more
Yep.
like, I don't know, moving something, writing something on your dry erase board or, on your, maybe
Yeah,
your
like an
notebook.
active communication.
Yeah. Active communication. Which would you prefer? If your house was haunted, would you want the residual haunting or would you want the intelligent haunting? Which one
That's
would be like, hey?
that's a great question. I think as long as it was good natured, I think I
Mm,
might want the intelligent haunting
yeah,
because then you could try to develop a relationship or
sure.
communicate with it. I think that would be kind of a cool experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I don't like about the residual haunting is you've read stories like this, I'm sure, where people say they wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, there's some little girl with her eyes gouged out standing at the foot of your bed, and you're like, ah, right? And it
Yeah.
just happened. After a while, I was laughing at him, and I asked my wife this, and she was like, yeah, I'd get sick of it. I'd be like, little girl, can you just just
Yeah.
go,
Take a
please?
hike. Yeah.
Take a hike. I'm sick of
Yeah.
waking up because it would lose its effect, right? If you
Mhm.
woke up every morning, I woke up every morning or whatever, and there was a little girl or an elderly gentleman standing at the foot of your bed, you'd be like, oh man,
Not this again. Yeah.
not this again.
Yeah.
Can you just go and tell me what? And that's where I like intelligent haunting, where someone could be like, hey, um, send me to the light or get rid of that vase or you know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
then you could be like, oh, get rid of that vase. Great. I'll go to
Or
whatever.
maybe set some boundaries. Be like, okay, if you want to hang out
Yeah,
in here, this is your room in life. It can be yours to
right.
death, but don't bother us in the bedroom. Don't sneak up on me in the bathroom.
Right. I'm showering and suddenly, yeah,
Yeah.
turn the cold
Yeah.
water on. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks,
So
buddy.
so we'll get to our let's get to our topic. So spooky
Sure.
friends, we're gonna get spooky here. And like Jeff and I were talking about, there's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of spooky stuff. And we're going to, and Jeff, I need your help here to
All
tell me if
right.
this is rated too high or too low and what you know about each one. If you've done an episode about this, please mention your episode so people can check it out, like Haunchyville. So I'm going to rate the top 10 scariest places in Wisconsin. So,
Mm-hmm.
number one, Summerwind.
Summerwind. I was just there a few weeks ago, and it's
Oh,
still active. And
yeah.
unfortunately, the current proprietors, they're getting older. They're
Hmm,
not in the best health, so
sure.
they're unloading it. And the
Hmm,
idea is that maybe a neighboring resort will buy it, but likely the ghost hunting aspect has come to an end there, at least in this current era. And it's
really?
unfortunate because I've seen Summerwind in its glory in pictures from like the
Yes.
1920s,
It's
and it's an
gorgeous.
absolute beautiful resort.
Gorgeous.
But yeah, have you been there?
So I have a strange story. I haven't been there. My buddy, so we did episode number 2, Garyland Price, check
Hmm.
it out.
Yep.
We did where I was doing a road trip with my buddy. We just motorcycle, just whatever, driving around Wisconsin. And he goes, let's
Hmm.
go to Summerwind. And I go, no, I'm going to respect them. It's still a private place. He goes, well, I'm going to do it. So he goes driving down this whatever trail, I guess. And he was sitting there for like 5 minutes, kind of looking around. This sheriff comes in and he goes, you got to get off of here now. You got to leave. This is private property. Go. He's a real
Hmm.
jerk to my friend. And I'm like, okay. So my friend leaves and stuff. And I guess then the sheriff was like, hey, look, I didn't mean to be a jerk to you. But whoever sets foot on that ground, there's always something bad that happens to him. And I'm just trying to protect you, son. So please don't go on it. And my friend was like, first of all, how did he know that I was on this property? Because there was nothing. We were like riding like on a Wednesday afternoon. So there was
Yeah.
not a lot of traffic or anything like that.
No, and
And
it's really like I thought it
it's
was right
strange.
in Lando Lakes, but it's quite a ways outside. It's probably about 10
Yeah.
miles outside of Lando Lakes. It's
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere. There's other people with cabins there, and there's a lot of boats on the lake,
Yeah.
but it's very remote. So
Correct.
for a sheriff or
Yeah.
a policeman to be there at that time is kind of unfortunate, but
Yeah.
Yeah, Fox Valley Ghost Hunters had invited me, and I got to see it.
Nice.
Kind of the last hurrah. Did some spirit box sessions,
Yeah.
and got some intelligent responses there. So we're not sure,
Nice.
is there uh, ghosts that have come with other people, kind of hitchhiked with some of the other team members? Are there still ghosts there from, the olden days? I'm not quite sure, but
Yeah.
it definitely was a paranormal Wisconsin bucket list item for me. So I'm glad I got to at least do
That.
that. And so here's another funny story. I know we
Yeah.
we got 9 more to get through, but
Yeah. No problem.
I got there. They had a Friday night event and a Saturday night event, and I did the
Sure.
Saturday night event. So some of the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters had already set up camp, right next to the ruins.
Yeah.
So I had pulled in and I saw kind of where they were set up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're welcome to pitch a tent here or there," and I was like, "Okay." Or they said, "Well, there's a clearing right there that you can pitch your tent." So I'm like, "Oh, okay." Well, my truck was right there. It was pretty buggy and it was starting to drizzle. So I'm like, "All right, well, I'll just throw up my tent here,
Yeah. Sure.
just be done. It's right by my truck. Don't have to haul anything."
Right.
And pitched my tent and met the other people around the campfire. And then
Sure.
sure enough, they told me, "Well, Jeff, you just set up your tent on an Indian burial mound." And I'm just like, "Well, that is great." But I didn't have any experiences overnight there. I slept very well.
Nice.
So it was very peaceful. I tried to be respectful, but I felt like of all places to pitch your tent right on top of a mound, which is and kind of a synchronicity there is.
I love it.
While I was pitching my tent there, my friend came up to me and she is kind of sensitive, and she's like, "Do you know if there's any Indian mounds around here?" I said, "You know what? That's a good question. I'm not sure." And then sure enough, turns out we were standing on one while we were having that conversation. Yes. So yeah, I would say as far as its haunted history and legacy, it's hard to put one above Summerwind. So I'll keep it there at the number 1 spot.
Okay, great. So, but I got a challenge for you because I've stayed here, and if you're a sports fan, you've heard this. The Pfister Hotel, number 2. Because sports fans, the reason I say that, just really quick, the reason I say you're probably like, sports fans, what does a hotel do with sports fans? So when people play the Milwaukee Brewers, they are offered obviously a number of hotels, and I remember seeing just a grown man, baseball player, big guy, go, "I'm not staying there. I stood there last time. I saw a ghost. No way I'm staying there. Find me a different hotel." So, Pfister Hotel, tell me a little bit about that, Jeff.
Yeah, so Pfister Hotel, like you said, it's the traveling team's hotel, and a number of reputable big league players have stayed there and have asked in the middle of night to switch rooms, or they find alternative accommodations. So it's long been known to be haunted. It is an old hotel, and from what I've heard, it's very luxurious. I have not stayed there. I live in Madison, so it's only an hour away. So if I ever go to Milwaukee, I'll usually just drive back the same night because, if it's late at night, it's only in an hour shot up 94 to Madison. So it is on my bucket list to at least stay there or at least visit the lobby and kind of take in. But the legend is that it's haunted by the proprietor, Charles Pfister, kind of looking after his hotel. So these big league players have had stuff be inexplicably moved. I've heard everything from something like as simple as like a cell phone being on like an opposite nightstand to entire desks or furniture is being shuffled around the room while they're in the bathroom or whatnot. Yeah. So it's a spooky place, and I think the lore definitely dictates a number 2 ranking.
Yeah. So it the other thing, this one baseball player, and I can't remember his name, but he's a big time guy for the Phillies, and
Bryce Harper.
In town. Probably Bryce Harper. Yeah,
I think Bryce Harper definitely showed up in one of the news articles on it.
Okay,
probably when he was with the Nationals. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, national.
Yep.
So anyway, he put on his clothes for the next day. He said he put him
Hmm.
on the bed. He went in the bathroom. Then he comes out, and they're gone. And he's like, "Oh, well, maybe I don't know, whatever, right? It's been a long road trip, and these guys are on the road a long time, right? So it's forget." He goes back in the bathroom, comes back out. They're back on the bed again, and he goes, "Yep, I'm out." I'm gone. And if you know who Bryce Harper is, just look up a picture of Bryce Harper. He is not a
He's a burly
small
dude.
guy.
He's
He's
like
a
a
burly
modern day
dude.
lumberjack. Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
big guy.
he's not and he's like, "Yep, God, I'm out."
Yep.
And you hear this
Yep.
all the time from baseball players who say like, "Nope, not staying there." So, excellent. So my next one is a little bit of maybe we'll have to move this down, but I've been at this one too. By the way, the Pfister Hotel, I was at a wedding there. So I didn't really have any experiences. It was just gorgeous. It was a real fun wedding. I didn't get the chance to stay over, but trust me, get a chance, check it out. It's absolutely gorgeous hotel. So the next one is, I put it up here at number 3. I've been there and I had just a weird experience when I was there. Nothing like I saw anything, but Nelson's Hall, Washington Island. So are you familiar with that one at all, Jeff?
I'm familiar with that one. I have not been there. I've been to Washington's Island. So the notable thing about Nelson's is it is apparently the longest active tavern in Wisconsin because the wily old Dane, Tom Nelson, who emigrated from Denmark in 1890, he decided to open this beer hall in 1899 and owned it through Prohibition. But Nelson, he kind of wiggled his way through a loophole in that 18th Amendment we call Prohibition. He applied for a pharmacy license and he served bitters, Angostura bitters, for stomach ailments. So, for medicinal purposes, he was able to dispatch Angostura bitters to his patrons. Now, if anybody knows, Angostura bitters is a key ingredient in old fashioned, and it gives it kind of that bitter flavor.
Right.
I like the taste of it, but I would probably not order a shot out of fun. But you can go to Nelson's Hall on Washington Island, and you can join the Bitters Club. So what you do is you say, I want to join the Bitters Club. They pour you a shot of Angostura bitters. You down the shot. You dip your thumb into the empty shot glass, so you get that nice dark, bitters on your thumb, and then you stamp your card with your thumbprint, and you're officially a member of the Bitters Club. Nice. So it's a long-running tradition, and Tom Nelson, that wily old Dane, he lived till 90 despite drinking bitters every day. So maybe there's some healing properties to it as well, but he still is said to haunt the property. Like I said, I have yet to be there. It's on my bucket list. Next time I get to Washington Island, it's going to be the first stop for me, of course.
Awesome.
But
so I forgot to mention Pfister Hotel is episode 3 for us. This is episode 16. I was there, and when I was there, they were trying to get me to drink bitters. And me and my buddies were there. We were on a fishing trip. I'm like, no, I don't. No, dude, I'm gonna have my Pabst Blue Ribbon. And so, but when I remember when I said that, this is maybe it's just because I was tired or whatever. But as soon as I said, nah, I'm not gonna drink that bitter stuff, I felt like a chill went down my spine. Like somebody was like, what? Like, the Great Dane there, the old Dane saying, hey man, why don't you don't like that? You don't want to have a bitter?
You're in my hall.
Yeah.
Have some bitters. So I will definitely be taking on the bitters challenge when I go.
Awesome. So the next one is, I would love to see this if this would happen. Riverside Cemetery, Appleton, Wisconsin. There's our episode 19 for that. This one is Mary Blood, where
Kate
supposedly
Blood.
Kate Blood. Thank you.
Yep.
Good catch, Jeff.
Yep.
Where supposedly this bleeds. The tombstone will bleed on certain full moon nights or certain nights. But I think there's a specific night you have to go to. Maybe you can help me with that, Jeff.
Yeah. So the lore around the gravesite of Kate M. Blood is that she murdered her husband and 3 children. Now, the
Yes.
mother, Kate Blood, her gravestone is set back further towards the wood line, kind of out of the regular ring of prominence.
Yeah.
And visitors to the cemetery, they report feeling uneasy or unwell. They see shadowy figures and balls of light in this section of the cemetery. Now, it's said if you touch the grave marker, blood will appear or ooze from the face of the marker.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, we can't let historical facts get in the way of a good story. So,
right.
Yeah. So perhaps it was Blood's name that brought along this ominous legend in conjunction with the arrangement of those tombstones. So, a simple exercise in like reading her logic, we can see that the main marker belongs to 2 people. Directly below Kate's names, you'll see her husband's name, George M. Miller. Now, Kate was laid to rest in 1874, where George lived much later, 1916. So, any inkling that she murdered her husband that lived, what is that, 40 years longer than her?
Yeah, how do you do
can
that?
be dispelled. And unfortunately, Kate died in 1874, childless. George Miller, he went on to marry Mary Moulton Hutchinson, and the 3 separate markers there were Kate, George, and Mary. So that kind of dispels the myth, but people still have experiences there. So maybe it's not Kate Blood, but maybe it's somebody else that has been overlooked because Kate's getting all the attention.
Yeah, but it's such a, right, you say, don't let science get in the way of a great story.
Yeah.
That is such a great one. So rounding up the top 5 is the Brumder Mansion, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about it. What anything, any feelings, any like
so the Brumder, it was commissioned by a wealthy newspaper magnate, George Brumder. He was he published a German newspaper in early Milwaukee. Now, the legends around the property are that a ballroom in the basement was operated as a speakeasy during Prohibition. We have a lot of Prohibition lore in Wisconsin, everything from Nelson's. Now we're talking about the Brumder, and then every place in between is associated with Al Capone or John Dillinger, some rightfully so. So, other than that, the original proprietor, George Jr., is said to haunt his former quarters, and people have reported, shadows, footsteps, even humming, and some people have even reported the rapid onset of like a physical illness while in that suite. And then there's also a playful or mischievous young child that haunts a suite called the Marion Suite or the Emma Suite. So these specific rooms are reported like unexplained sensations of someone jumping on the bed. So they think that the kids still haunt the mansion. Now, I've stayed there, and I stayed in, I believe it's called the Gold Suite. And it is associated with a apparition by the name of Aunt Pussy. And she is said to visit her tenants at night. I stayed there about 10 years ago when me and my wife first started dating. We looked for a little getaway, and we stayed at the Brumder because I've heard about the lore and the legacy. And, it was beautiful accommodations, some of the best scrambled eggs and bacon that I've ever had as part of the bed and breakfast package. As far as any activity, I don't have any stories to report. Okay. But it is definitely a place that everyone should visit It's great for a little weekend getaway,
Yes.
um, just to stay in kind of a Victorian era hotel of that magnificence,
Yes.
and the pricing's not too bad still. So I'd highly recommend that everybody check it out.
Yeah. There is a one other thing. Supposedly, Aunt Pussy loves the song "Take Me Out to the Ball Game."
Oh, I
So
haven't
some
heard
people
that.
put that on the radio because it's, I don't know if it's close to Miller Park or whatever it's called nowadays. I always forget State Farm Park, whatever the heck,
Yeah, it's AmFam Field, but in our
AmFam
hearts,
Field.
it will always be Miller Park.
It will always be Miller Park. Yes. So anyway, people who would, they'll stay there and then go to the game. So I guess people were putting that on the radio or something like that, or I don't know, the record player. Again, let's not get in the way of a good story. And then when people would try to play other music, all of a sudden, they're like the record player will malfunction, or the stereo, or whatever, will malfunction. But then when they put the song back on, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," no problem.
So it's like she's protesting for that song.
Yeah,
That's
she's
great.
protesting. She like
I
that
love
song.
that. Love that little wrinkle. And yeah, it's I believe it's on Wisconsin Avenue, which is right down the street from Miller Park. A ways, but still,
Yeah.
just
So
up the road.
top 5. Anything you want to change? Anything you go, well, I
Well,
think move
I
this
think
one up or move this one back down.
I think we might have to slide Kate Blood down. I think
Okay.
if you're ranking Wisconsin Legends, I think it's
Mhm.
definitely in the top 5 of Wisconsin Legends as far as haunted places.
Yeah.
I know it's yet to be seen, but I need to know, 6 through 10 to really make the determination.
Okay, then let's get going on that. So the next one is Holy Hill. It's like a seminary. It's this beautiful place in northern Wisconsin. I don't know if you've ever heard of this place. Supposedly Bigfoot is supposed to be there.
Yeah,
And an
there's
insane hermit. So I don't know if you've heard of
so
this
there's
place.
lots of lore around Holy Hill. So Holy Hill to a lot of Wisconsin Catholics is like a kind of they make a pilgrimage there
Right.
because it's this beautiful old shrine. It's on like the highest point in southeast Wisconsin. If you just Google Holy Hill pictures, especially in the fall, just gorgeous. It's a beautiful old cathedral. So it sits on top of, like I said, the highest hill, and the storied history goes back as far as Wisconsin's recorded history. So even the Potawatomi that inhabited the land before the French explorers came found it to be like a sacred area. Now, a Jesuit priest, if he built a stone shrine with a cross on the mount back in the mid 1600s. So you think that's mid 1600s. Wisconsin's only been a state since 1840. So the history of the site predates our statehood by 200 years.
Yeah.
And then there's a guy named Francis Sorbio. He was a Frenchman. He came to Wisconsin in search of that shrine in the 1830s. So this was almost 200 years later. And he decided to stay, and he was known as the Hermit of Holy Hill. Now, he had been a witness to miracles, including the healing of paralyzed limbs, along with other cures. So it has kind of some lore around its healing powers, this specific site. Now, the building complex that you see today has got 2 twin spires, and those were constructed in like the early 1900s. And it's managed by the Discalced Carmelite Friars. Now, I'm not sure what the origins of their group is, but they're the caretakers of the current property. Now, like you said, the area around it, Holy Hill, it's of course subject to some spooky occurrences, as well as like a dogman sighting, like the Beast of Bray Road. And, some people said Bigfoot. And then also nearby is a place called Hubertus. And there's a specific road in Hubertus called Hog's Back Road, where it's allegedly
Right.
home to a goat man-like figure
Right.
that stalks the road. So it's got a lot of lore, a lot of history, and then a lot of spooky occurrences
Yeah.
to boot. So yeah, I think it's definitely up there as far as the lore and the history goes there. One place I definitely need to go see probably this fall.
Yeah. And recently, I put on, I believe on my Instagram social media site, like a figure, because there's a woman supposedly that haunts this place, and I can't remember the name of her, but she just walks around, and there's this picture this paranormal investigator took of this woman. You can see clearly an outline of a woman kind of going through some tall grass. And, it
Oh,
could be, again, that's the hard thing about paranormal, right, Jeff? Like, people go like, oh, that's just some dude right? Or that's some girl, or that's whatever. And you're like,
yeah.
it's hard to prove that, but it's still scary enough that it's kind of interesting
Yeah,
that
it just adds
someone
to the
caught that.
overall lore of the place. So yeah, it's very
Yeah,
cool. And like I said, definitely on the bucket list.
yeah. So now I'm going to throw you a curveball,
Okay.
okay? Because this
See if
one's
I'm
really
ready.
interesting to me. Maribel Caves, Maribel, Wisconsin. Are you familiar with that one at all?
Oh yeah. We did a
Oh,
podcast
great.
on Hotel Hell, which
Yes.
is right there at the Maribel Caves or the Charney Maribel Caves. So if there's one place that has more lore connected to it in Wisconsin, I don't know what is. So
Hmm.
the actual history of the place is intriguing in itself, and you can listen to the podcast for all the entire history because it's really quite cool. And I think the lore that's been grafted on kind of does a disservice. So
Yeah.
it was originally a health spa because of the springs there were mineral springs, so they were known for their healing. But it's said that the Maribel Caves Hotel burnt 3 times, all on the
Okay.
same day. Well, when you actually look into it, the place had never had a fire. The bottling factory for the mineral water had a fire. There have been several deaths associated with the property. You know, health spa people having heart attacks there. I think one of the workers there, a Polish gentleman, immigrant that had worked at the health spa, committed suicide there. And it was kind of a botched suicide. He wasn't
Yeah.
successful on the
Uh-huh.
first attempt and languished for a while. So it was a really tragic scene.
Ugh.
And the place kind of fell into disrepair after the Prohibition era. There's another marker. It's kind of the theme for tonight. The original people that ran the resort, they grew older. Their kids really didn't want to take it over, and then it kind of fell into disrepair. They leased it to a man out of Chicago, and then during Prohibition, it was associated with the Maribel Caves, which were well known for moonshining and run rumming.
Mm.
Because what better place to manufacture something illegal inside a cave,
Yeah.
naturally cold for storage,
Yeah.
and then you can back trucks up there. They used the mineral water hauling trucks as transport. So they said, "Oh, we're
Mm.
just hauling some mineral water to Chicago or Milwaukee
It's like
or
the
whatever,"
bitters
but
thing.
it was loaded down with hooch,
Yeah, yeah,
clear
yeah.
liquid, right? Glass bottles. So it's got a lot of lore to it. And then in the 1980 or 1970s, the original family, the Steinbreckers, one of their descendants actually purchased it. He turned it into the Maribel Caves Tavern, I believe the name was.
Hmm.
And this is when the lore really started, because apparently on the third story of the building. So just to back up a little bit, you need to pull up a picture of the Maribel Caves Hotel because it
Yeah.
looks like a medieval castle. It looks like something out of like Scotland or
Absolutely.
somewhere in the hills of Switzerland. And so it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, that place is haunted. But besides from like the alleged hauntings, it has a lot of history, and just I think a lot needs to be said on that specific topic.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I believe it was I can't remember the date, but I think in 2013 a really heavy windstorm came through
Yes.
and knocked down. So now it's just ruins
Mhm.
right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
Summer Wind, any chance of it being rebuilt or
Yeah.
restored to its former glory,
Right.
feels like that Windows has
Yeah.
closed. But
Yeah.
you can still check out the caves. The
Yep.
actual hotel property is fenced off, no
Right.
trespassing. They have
Yep.
cameras, and people respond just like John's friend with the sheriff.
Yes.
And then with the standing walls, you're gonna get stack stones. You don't want any of those to fall on
Yeah.
anybody. So
Yeah.
it's a danger to yourself. Even if the ghost won't get you, maybe a falling rock or brick
Mhm.
might. So
Yeah.
admire from afar. Check out the caves.
Beautiful.
I heard that's great for caving, and yeah, check it out.
Yeah. So
And
now
that's also on the Wisconsin Legends podcast as well.
yeah, so I would definitely listen to that because I kind of knew a little bit about it. Haven't really think. So I got a tie for number 8. I know you're probably saying, John, come on, you wimped out on me. But there are two bridges: the Siren Bridge in Siren, Wisconsin, and the Bloody Bride Bridge. Say that 50 times fast in Stevens
Yeah.
Point. And the reason I put these together is because Bloody Bride Bridge, the way it works is very simple. You go drive down there, and there's a woman that is dressed in a wedding gown or a wedding dress. She gets in your car. People said they've had conversations with her, and she just kind of sits there and doesn't say anything. And then when you get over the bridge, she's gone. So
Yes. So
go ahead.
it's a bridge on Highway 66, just outside of Stevens Point. And according to legend, a bride died here on her wedding day. So the accounts, like you said, they vary from legend to legend,
Right.
retelling to retelling. Some
Yeah.
say she died after her car veered off the road, unable to make the curve because it is a curved embankment on that bridge. Others assert it was a tragic head-on collision.
Mm.
However she passed, her presence has been made known to passersby, and she's still clad in that now bloodied wedding gown. And if you drive across the bridge after midnight, you may spot her standing on the roadside, and often, she appears in your back seat. As far as historical accounts, we can't find any
Right.
deaths associated with this. I know
Yeah.
there's been stories of police reports, but they really haven't done anything. It's a great legend, and growing up in Wisconsin Rapids, Stevens Point's the next big town over. So I had heard this one from friends that went to Spash and grew up in the Stevens Point area. So it's definitely one that you can check out. Maybe you'll have your own encounter with the Bride of Bloody Bride Bridge.
Yeah, and word of warning, because Dairyland Frights likes to keep everybody safe. Sometimes that bridge gets kind of foggy. So I know you're probably thinking, John, I'll go when it's super foggy and super creepy. It's a bridge, people. Cars go over the bridge.
And it is
Please
on a curve,
don't stop.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. I know you want to have a thrill and everybody wants that, but, I don't want anybody to get hurt. So there's your word of warning from Jeff and I. Disclaimer, yes. So the Siren Bridge, this is something I have to check out. So the Siren Bridge, one of the things that's supposed to happen is and this is a true documented story. I think I found some things on it. I don't know if these are the right things, but a mother and her. Go ahead. Oh, I go ahead really quickly. Yeah. A mother and her daughter, or I believe it was her daughter or baby, whatever, child, they went off the bridge, slid off the bridge, and they were killed. And supposedly, when you go over that bridge, and this is being a dad, we're both dads, so this is very sad for us. Supposedly on the radio, it will come up, they will say, Mommy, I need help, or Mommy, can you help me? Like a child's
Yeah.
voice will come on your radio, and I'm like, oh my God. That is
Yeah. So
spooky and terrifying. Go ahead, Jeff.
you had the same reaction that I did to this. So, you know, I I traffic in these stories. I try to write one legend for Instagram, Monday through Friday. And you hear these stories and you just kind of pass them off as
Yeah.
that's just a legend, or that's just a spook story, or maybe it's
Yeah.
a cautionary tale, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, like you said, Siren, it's a North Woodstown. I think it's kind of over by Eau Claire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and like you said, it's based on a true story.
Yeah.
So the grim reality is a young family died there March
Oh,
5th
okay.
of 1985. The vehicle carrying Rick, Rose, and Jody Kringle, they skidded off the highway
Mm.
during high winds in a March snowstorm. So their truck overturned into a nearby creek, and all three passengers were lost. And like you said, people that stop on Siren Bridge, some say that their radio will start to fuzz out, and this is the days where people still tuned into the FM band,
Right.
and the radio would project this "Help Me, Mommy," which is just kind of chilling,
Oof.
considering what happened. So,
Oof.
I heard the story. I thought nothing of it, but then I actually went on like newspaper archives or newspapers.com, and I found the actual clipping
Oh,
from
wow.
the story, and that really kind of sent
Oof.
chills up my
Yeah,
spine.
that hits you
And
hard.
being a dad of a daughter about that age, and thinking
Yes.
about the tragedy that befell this young family,
Yeah.
and then kind of thinking about this young girl still kind of there looking for help. It really kind of affected me deeply,
Yeah.
where most of this stuff I've brushed off. So yeah, this one kind of holds a kind of a special place for me because of how I
Yeah.
reacted to it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tragic place. I that being said, I still do want to check it
Right.
out, and
Yeah.
maybe if we can get in contact with young Jody, we can let her know
Yeah.
that it's okay to move on.
It's okay to move on. Right.
Yeah.
Now, there are some honorable mentions. Boy Scout Road is supposedly where some Boy Scouts were killed. There's a whole mess of stories with it. Also, there's a one called J Road, which a hiker. I don't know if you ever heard of this one.
The
This
J
one I
Road
didn't put on.
jogger, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So this one I didn't put on here because I'm like, I want to check this out for myself because some of it's like, yeah. So supposedly a jogger is jogging and some car sideswipes her, and now she comes out of the swamp, and it sounds like a cheesy horror movie. And supposedly too, there's a house that appears on fire, and supposedly there was a lady who owned all these cats, and all these cats are running out on fire, the lady's on fire, and people are seeing that. I'm like, okay.
That one's kind of outlandish, but
yeah, right.
yeah,
So
it's just
yeah,
another piece of the lore for the road or for the area.
So let's go to number 9. This one, I'll be honest with you, Jeff, I don't know much about. Maybe you can help me out with this one, but when I started reading about it, I was like, really? Wood County Insane Asylum, Marshfield, Wisconsin. Know anything about that?
Yeah, I do. So this, like Boy Scout Lane, not far from Wisconsin Rapids, the Wood County Asylum. It was an old Wood County Asylum near Marshfield, opened in the early 1900s, and it housed about 250 patients and staff. So the main purpose of the property was to house the incurably insane, and it also served as a working farm, giving patients the opportunity to farm an 18-acre plot. Now, but life wasn't necessarily just based around like leisurely farming. It sounded like these people were subject to like back-breaking labor.
Yeah.
And then there was also the unconventional treatments like electroshock therapy,
Mm-hmm.
bloodletting, shock-inducing ice baths, and even induced vomiting to try
Oh,
to rid the patient's body of the uncleanliness. So it doesn't sound like just your bucolic working farm where
yeah,
everybody's
right.
happy and,
Yeah.
you know, growing crops and harvesting. It sounds like it was not a desirable place. So the facility, it lasted until 1974,
Wow.
and they closed it down and uh, moved all of the patients to a better suited place for modern, mental health care. Now,
Mm,
once the building was abandoned, um, it attracted, of course, vagrancy and mischief, a place for teenagers to hang
yeah.
out and do their Ouija boards or occult
Right.
practices.
Right.
Now, the site has, since attracted paranormal investigators
Yeah.
who captured EVPs, disembodied voices, footsteps around the property. And they did take one barn
Mm,
and they um, signified it as a historical landmark. So that is protected, but everything else has been razed. But now it is owned and operated as a Marshfield scrap and recycling service center.
oh.
So I had a friend, a former coworker,
Mm,
that he grew up in Marshfield and he had worked there for a little bit of time. And he said that, during the day, the scrapyard, everything was normal. But he said definitely after sunset, it took
mm,
on a creepy feel after dark,
yeah.
is what he told me. So he said that he won't want to be there by himself at night after dark.
Sure.
And it sounds like it was unfortunately a place where people in need didn't get the care that they
Yeah.
deserved.
Same old
The
story,
humanity
right?
wasn't
Yeah. Same old
wasn't
story.
extended to them. Yeah, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
hopefully, eventually they'll move on. But yeah, there's a sad history there.
Mm. I just did the Edinburgh Manor. It's in Monticello,
Mm-hmm.
Iowa. My last episode. Very, very similar to this. It was like a poor farm for the
Mm-hmm.
incurably insane. But they
Yep.
said the lazy and able-bodied could go there too. And I'm like, wait a minute, lazy and able-bodied. Okay, but it was a retirement home, and it was full of
Mm-hmm.
abuse and everything. And the thing is, and you might have seen this on some of my social sites, is it closed in 2010, and people just left. So
Yeah.
there's pictures of like rooms with people's clothes still in the closet. Their slippers, still laying by the bed. Their bed's still made. Like someone said,
Oh,
"Go, you're going. Just get out." And
yeah. Wow.
basically threw them out. And I'm like, what a terrible, terrible place. And remember back in that day too, Jeff, you could be like, "Hey, honey, what's for dinner?" And she, "Oh, I didn't make dinner." Well, you're going to the. You're lazy. You're
we're
going to
checking you
that.
in at the farm. Yeah.
Here you go. You should have made me
You know,
dinner.
and we're of the age where we still grew up, and your dad would say, if you keep breaking stuff or keep doing this, you're gonna
Yeah.
send us to the poorhouse.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And we had no context for that, but
Right.
doing the research on
Right. Yeah.
places like this, you're like,
Yeah.
oh wow, these places really existed, and unfortunately, they were not a place where people got the care
No.
that they needed.
No, they didn't. So, all right. Number 10, I admit, maybe not the scariest one, but I'm a homer, and I used to go
All
to
right.
this when I was in my youth. The Wonder Bar in Madison, Wisconsin. So I know
Oh
that's a little
man.
bit
Okay.
cheap one, but I
You
put it
know,
in there.
yeah. So personal story about the
Okay.
Wonder Bar.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Madison in 2009, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
called the Wonder Bar. It was called the Bar Next Door. So this is
Mm,
a bar.
okay.
It's across from the Coliseum in
Yes.
Madison. You'll see it off the Beltline when you drive in or drive down John Nolan Drive. And it unfortunately has since closed.
Oh
So
no, I
yeah,
didn't
it
know
kind of broke
that.
my heart because when I had first moved to Madison, I lived on Olin
Yeah,
Avenue down by Park Street. Not the best part of town,
no.
but the closest bar was the bar next door, which became the Wonder Bar. So the Wonder Bar um, was also connected to Prohibition, and it was run by a mob family called the Tuohys. They were a Chicago crime syndicate,
Okay.
and uh, apparently um, the brother that ran the bar, his name was Eddie, and he wasn't associated with it, but there was some illicit activity that definitely
Hmm.
happened in there. But fast forward to when I moved there in 2009, I heard, oh yeah, that place is haunted.
Yeah.
And if you look at the old stone structure, you'll see that it has two corner towers on it, which would have been
Hmm.
perfect for either gun nests or lookouts. So
Right.
I had made friends with the bar manager at the time, and I had asked him, I said, have you ever experienced anything here? He said, you know what, Jeff? I have. And then
Hmm.
he pulled out a stack of, this was back in, 2009. This would have been like iPhone 1 era. So
Sure.
a lot of people still had regular, not Polaroids, but regular 35 millimeter printouts. And he
Sure.
showed me this printout of,
Uh-huh.
on the main level in one of those corner towers, this wispy apparition of
Oh wow.
what looked like a man. And this sounds so cliche. And if somebody told me
Sure.
this, I'd call them, say you're full of shit. But it looked like a man in a fedora holding a Tommy gun in this wispy apparition. And this was before,
Wow.
modern day,
Yeah.
where it's easy to like Photoshop and print something
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like somebody actually captured this. And I was very intrigued by that. And I wish I had known what happened to that photo because shortly after I moved out of that apartment, it was renovated and turned into the Wonder Bar. And it's unfortunate that I
Hmm.
think it was a casualty of COVID.
Sure.
And if you're a Madisonian, there are a lot of people looking to move to the Madison area. They want to live in the
Yeah.
downtown. They want to live by Lake Monona, Lake Mendota,
Yes.
and they are tearing things down as fast as they're building it. And this is
Shame.
one of the sites. Yes, it's a shame because we need to keep Madison weird, and we need to protect some of this historical heritage and not just make
Yeah.
everything high-rise apartments. That's kind of my screed for the evening. But it's one of the places that has been on the list of places to tear down and redevelop. And it'd really be a shame because it's, I have a personal connection to it because it was, the first bar that I went to when I came to
Sure.
Madison. And
Right. Yeah. Me too.
it just has such a rich history of
Yeah.
gangster lore to haunting,
Yeah.
so it like checks all over the boxes for me.
Mm,
And if it went away, um which I assume it probably will
yeah.
be
Probably
moved
will.
and reconstructed somewhere if we're lucky, if not raised. But if it is knocked down, I'm gonna have to go grab a brick or something like that for a memento because so it
Yes.
was a great place, and it's great. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I love
unfortunately,
that.
I don't have the best news about that one, but definitely
Uh,
an awesome place with
yeah.
lots of history and legends.
So, what do you think of the list? Is there anything you would add? Is there anything, John, you missed this one?
The one that I would add is we were talking about the Poor Farm, the Wood County Asylum. Let's talk about the Sheboygan Asylum.
Oh,
Now,
right.
it's just outside of Sheboygan. The Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, the same group that I went to Summerwind with, they run tours there, and I got a chance to about a year ago to visit. And it has a similar history to the Wood County Asylum, but it sounds like the treatments weren't as horrific. It sounds like they
Oh,
treated their
that's
patients
good.
a little bit better. So at least that's what they tell you on the ghost hunt. So I hope that's true.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of activity there. There's one little room they call the chapel where the tour guides kind of the way that the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters tours work is a lot of times you go on these ghost hunts and they'll just be like a tour guide that will walk you through and tell you like a scary story. Um, with the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, they're ghost hunters at heart. So they will bring all of their gadgets and gizmos
Sure.
and they will try to involve the group in
Yeah.
a group ghost hunt. And, we had the EVP, or not the EVP rope, the EMF rope laid out with the little lights on it. And whenever something gets near and changes the EMF, it changes the colors. We got so much activity in that room and lots of spirit box activity. We got to visit that chapel. We got to visit there was like a cold storage for the bodies. We got to go into that room and conduct a seance. We got to go into some steam tunnels and had just an incredible experience with the spirit box session there. So anybody who wants a little thrill, I would definitely recommend the Sheboygan County Asylum. And the Great Lakes Paracon is coming up next month, September 21st, at the Glen Beulah School, which is another haunted school not too far from the Sheboygan Asylum. And then in the evening, after having the conference at the school, we'll be heading to the asylum for our own little ghost hunt. So I believe there's still a few tickets left. Definitely check it out. The Glen Beulah School, really cool. We're not sure what accounts for the hauntings. It doesn't seem like anybody's ever died in the old school, but when yeah. Well, the thing that's funny, the thing that's funny about schools is, what do we dream about? One of the main recurring dreams that I have is being back in school and not being able to find my schedule, or not having my homework completed, or not being able to get into my locker. So maybe we astral project to these schools. Maybe we're disembodied there. And maybe that's what accounts for the haunting of these old schools that don't have, the typical history of death, like prisons or these poor farms or insane asylums that we like to haunt so much, or like to investigate the hauntings of so much. So maybe that's what it is. So I definitely put the asylum on that list, and I think it's a pretty solid list. But like you said, John, Wisconsin, it's no stranger to hauntings of paranormal and the paranormal lore, and just kind of getting back to our beginning conversation about how we really got into it. So there was this book my mom brought home from the library when I was about 8 years old. And it was this dusty old book from like the 70s. I think it was, maybe the early 60s, called Wisconsin Lore. Do you have a copy of this, John?
No, I don't, but I know about it and I have seen it. I want to read it. It's on my to-do list.
Yeah. So it's kind of dated. It's kind of scatterbrained. But in one of the opening chapters, it said, if the lore is any indication, Wisconsin contains more ghosts per square mile than any state in the union. Something to that effect. And I can remember reading that when I was 8 or 9 and just kind of feeling a shiver come up my spine, thinking, oh my God, I had no idea. Like, I just took it for granted. But it was really a cool project by 2 professors. They traveled around Wisconsin. Maybe they took a sabbatical. Maybe it was during their summer vacation.
Sure.
And in like the 60s, they went around and they collected all of these old, folk tales and ghost tales and stories, and compiled it into this book called Wisconsin Lore. So from like a historical aspect, it's definitely worth getting a copy. You can pick one up for a few bucks on eBay. I got a couple copies in like the original first edition hardcovers, just because it made such an impact on me. It's not much for the reading, but there's a lot of stories in it that were definitely worth documenting for the time, and probably carried forward into the modern day mythos of Wisconsin legends and lore.
Yeah, and I've read like Weird Wisconsin. And one of the
cities, you can actually see it right here, right next to. I got Robin Yount. I got my BadgerLand Legends logo. I got the haunchies here, and then right there, Weird Wisconsin.
Yes. Nice. And one of the things I was saying, and all my listeners know this, all my spooky friends,
Yeah.
know that I've been to Savannah. I've been to Savannah
Oh
twice.
yeah.
So Savannah is like you were talking about, ghost per capita, whatever. What
Yeah.
was so funny? I went on the ghost tours and stuff, and it was just incredible and everything. I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful city. It's definitely. I don't know if taking the family is maybe a great idea, because they have
Maybe
some
when they
other
get a little
issues
older.
going on. But the wife, and it's still gorgeous. Anyway, every point of that place is haunted. Like I literally was, and I've told this a million times. I was like in a Sonic drive-in, okay, because that's like their Culvers, basically to
Sure.
us. And I joked with the guy, I said, "Oh, was that bathroom haunted?" And he just looked at me seriously, went, "Yep." And I went, "What?" And I
Well,
stayed at
if
this like really nice hotel, right? Like it was like a Marriott. And I went outside by myself to take a walk around downtown. And I come back
Mhm.
in, and this really nice older Southern woman goes, "Darling, you do not walk in Savannah at night, sweetie. You do not do that." And I was like, "Because of the crime?" And she goes, "Well, that, but also you will be followed by a spirit, and you will bring that spirit here." And she was, Jeff, adamant about it. She was like, "Don't ever do that again. I will go with you after I get off my shift." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, okay, take it easy, like, all right." But that's the
Oh
way
my.
that town views their whole history.
Yeah.
It's incredible to me. It's
That's
awesome.
amazing. And the similar vibe in New Orleans too. One of the
Yes.
I have not been to Savannah. It's definitely a place I want to get to. Maybe some fall or spring would be great for that.
Absolutely.
But you talk about the haunted Sonic bathroom.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have any haunted Sonics. We don't have a haunted Culvers, but we have a haunted Dairy Queen and a haunted Subway. But a haunted Dairy Queen for America's Dairyland just seems fitting.
Yes, absolutely. And the haunted subway is actually near me in Dodgeville.
That's right. Yeah.
That is
And
the
I think the
one.
haunted Dairy Queen is in Appleton. And there's two in
Yes.
Appleton, so make sure you
Yeah, I
got the
think there's
right
two in
haunted one.
Appleton. Yeah, which makes
Yeah.
sense. You got all this grave blood, and oh, you got this. So, Jeff, I could talk to you for hours. Like I was telling your
Yeah,
buddy
definitely.
Mike, you guys have so much great stuff. I love everything you guys put out. But hey, my spooky friends want to know where they can find you too. So, where do we find you? Where can we listen
Yeah.
to this
So
great stuff?
I've talked about it endlessly already on this podcast. So Wisconsin Legends podcast. There are only 7 episodes right now. Me and Mike we're both fathers of young children.
Of course.
He's in a band. He runs the tours. I got a
Yep,
full-time
sounds fun.
job. So what we do is we do a batch release. So the first
Yeah,
season was 7 episodes. We have a new season coming out, and
nice.
we're going to drop in probably mid-September. We're your neck of the woods. We're going to Frank Lloyd Wright country. We're going to talk
Nice.
about Frank Lloyd Wright. 2
All
episodes on
right.
that. We're going to go up to Rhinelander and talk about the Hodag.
Nice.
We have a UFO episode, Wisconsin UFOs,
Love
that
it.
is in production right now. We're going to talk about a little known flap of murders that happened in our state capital in the 70s called
Oh,
the Mad City Murders or the Mad City Slayings. We have
I like
that
that.
episode. Yeah, so we got a lot in store. We're going to go to Waukesha, and we're going to talk about the story of a boy that showed up in the Waukesha quarry, and they called
Okay.
him Little Lord Fauntleroy. So we're going to talk about that. So we got
Nice.
a whole slate of new
Yes.
episodes coming out, and the format for it is we like to take one subject and kind of give a broad history on it.
Sure.
I talked about the Maribel Caves Hotel. I probably have compiled the most thorough history of the place that's been recorded in one place. That place deserves its own book. So if anybody gets squirrely and wants to write a book, reach
All
out to
right.
me on the
There
socials.
you go.
BadgerLand Legends on Facebook, BadgerLand Legends on Instagram, and yeah, we'll chat. I'm always happy to share resources, swap stories. Tell me Wisconsin legend I've never heard. I've written probably over 600 different legends just from
Nice.
Wisconsin. And when I started this in 2020, I was kind of like, well, I don't want to do too often because then I'm going to run out of legends. Well, 700 later, I'm still getting emailed with,
going strong.
I thought I knew everything there was about spooky
Going
Wisconsin,
strong.
but somebody hits me with a zinger. So if you got a zinger, something I haven't heard about, drop me a DM, drop me a message on Facebook, or drop me an email, jeff@badgerlandlegends.com, and I'd be happy to hear about it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. If you ever need me to be a guest on your show, I haven't told you my Jeffrey Dahmer story yet. It's not my personal story, but there's a Jeffrey Dahmer story from my cousin who worked with him at the chocolate factory during his
Ambrosia.
His height of killings, I guess.
His reign of terror.
His reign of terror. There we go.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, and if you guys ever want to be on, you and Mike, I'd love to have you on. You guys are great stories, great information. Wisconsin Legends. Please don't miss that. Check it out. It's worth your while. I'll put everything on the links on the episode, so you can contact Jeff about his book about the Maribel Caves, because that sounds amazing. But before we end up for tonight, Jeff, we ended doing two different things. First, we say, hi to your ghost. Hello, ghost.
Now, see, after last night and my encounter, Joe, I'm a little nervous to do that.
Well, but you're being nice. That's my point.
Okay.
You're being nice. You're not, making them feel excluded so they don't start pushing books off of shelves or something. But then we also say, stay spooky. So stay spooky, Jeff. Loved having you on, and look forward to getting out the episode and hopefully talking again soon.
Yeah. So one more thing, we'll have to definitely do this when the new season drops, and then the Milwaukee Paracon is coming up. That's sponsored by American Ghost Walks, Mike's outfit. So that's coming up October 14th in Milwaukee. So check that out. And hey there, ghost. Stay spooky. Thanks, John. Have a good one.